In this session, we'll discuss hard assertions in detail. The word assert means to state clearly and definitely that something is true. That's exactly what we do in TestNG as well. We state that something is true, and if it's not, the assert statement will throw an exception and the test will terminate and fail. We'll use assert class for hard assertions. Here you can see the available methods in assert class. Let's go through each one of them. In the case of assert.fail, we want the test to be failed without checking any condition. In fact, we already used it in our project. Let's take a look. Well, let's go to purchase test, and here we have a test method purchase test 3. Okay, and we already have one assert statement here, assert.fail, and we mentioned some text here. Okay, assert.fail and then some verification failed. So this statement will make the test case to be failed, whatever be the case. Okay, and when it fails, it will throw an exception with the message some verification fail. Okay, and then in order to understand it better, what we can do is let's add a print statement here, and let's print something like test finished. Okay, so what happens here is, since we have an assert statement and that is executed at line number 26, the test will be terminated and it will be failed at this point. So the next statement won't be executed. Okay, let's execute it and check it out. So here I'm gonna run this test and let's check the result. You can see that the test is failed. Now let's see what's being printed to the console. The purchase test 3. Okay, it's printing the purchase test 3 statement from the println statement, and then the next is the assert.fail. That's also executed. Here you can see the assertion failed. So here there is an exception, right? Assertion error. And you can see the string some verification fail. That's the message of this assertion. And after that, you can see that this statement is not executed. This print statement test finished is not executed. It's not here. All right. Now let's learn assert equals. In this case, we are asserting that two values, actual value and expected values, are equal. If they are not, it will throw an exception with the message values do not match. All right. And since there is an exception, the test will be terminated and it will be failed. Now let's try it out in the project. Here we can define two variables. Let's have a string variable with actual value, and then let's give a value. Let's give some string value. I'm gonna give value as 1, and then let's have one more variable. Let's name it as maybe expected value. Let's give some value. Maybe let's give one for this one as well. All right. There's a typo. Let me fix it. Okay. Now instead of fail, let's use assert equals. Okay, so let's have assert equal statement here, and then we need to specify both the actual and expected value here. So let's mention actual value and then expected value, and in case if they don't match, then we need to have some message, right? So let's have a message, the values don't match, something like that. All right. All right, so let's see what happens here. So here we are asserting that two values are equal, right? So this could be of any type. Now we are using string, but you can use any other types of values as well, like integers or something else. But both should be of the same type. That's only the rule. All right. So here, now in this case, both are equal, right? So definitely, it won't throw any exception. So this will be paused, and it will print the next. It will execute the next line as well, right? So you will get test finished printed on the console. All right, so let's execute and try it out. I'm going to execute this test and we'll see the result. The test is passed, and here you can see that purchase test 3 is printed from this println statement, and then assert equals is executed, and you can see that test finished. That's also from the same test, right? So the assert is passed here. Now let's make it fail. So I'm gonna make the expected value as a different one, maybe 2. Now what happens is, like, we are asserting that two values are equal, but they are not, right? So this will fail. It will throw an exception with this message, values don't match, and then it will terminate the test from here itself, right? So definitely it will fail and it will be terminated. So definitely this line won't be executed, right? Because it's terminated from here. Let's execute it and try it out. We'll run it and then you can see the result. It's failed. You can see that purchase test 3 is printed from here, this println statement, and you have the assert equals, right? So here you have an assertion fail and it says values don't match. That is this message. And then it's showing the actual and expected values here. Expected is 2, but actually is 1, all right? And here you can see that the next line, okay? So here we have test finished. So this is not printed here, okay? Because the test is terminated from this line itself. Now let's take a look at assert not equals assertion. So in this case, we are asserting that two values are not equal. Okay, so if they are not equal, this will pass. If they are equal, then it will throw an exception and your test will fail. Okay, so let's go to a project and try it out. All right, here let's change the statement. Instead of assert equals, let's say assert not equals. All right. So here now currently the values are like 1 and 2, right? They are not equal. So whatever we are asserting is true, right? Because they are not equal. So there won't be a failure here. So let's execute it and try it out. The test should pass now. See, it's passing because they are not equal. Whatever we are asserting is true, right? And now let's make both the values equal. I'm going to change the expected value to 1. So what happens here? We are asserting that the values are not equal, but they are equals, right? So it should throw an exception, right? Let's execute it and see that the test is failing here. Now let's learn how to assert a particular value is true. We can use assert.assertTrue method, and then you mention the value here. And if this value is not true, then it will throw an exception with whatever message that you specify here. Likewise, you can use assert false method to assert a particular value is false. And if it is not correct, then it will throw an exception with whatever message that you specify here. Now let's apply both these methods in our code. Well, let's try it out in the purchase test class. I'm going to create one more test method. Let me simply copy and paste purchase test 3 and let's rename it as purchase test 4. Well, here I'm going to change the println statement purchase test 4, and now let me get rid of these 3 lines. Okay, and here I'm gonna declare a new variable boolean and let's name it as b, and let's give a value, maybe true. All right, now let's include the assert statement, assert dot assert true. All right, now let's specify the value here, which is b, and then let's give a message. So let's specify not true. Okay, so that means we're asserting that a particular value is true here, and if it is not true, whatever message that we specify here will be printed. Okay, but in this case we know that the value is true, so this test will pass. Let's execute it and try it out. Now you can see that the test is passed and it has executed completely. Even after the assert statement, we have the next line which is executed here, and you can see that test finished is printed here, right? All right, now let's change this value to false. Now in this case it should be fail, right? Because we are asserting the value to be true, but this is false, right? Now let's execute it again and check it out, and you can see that it's failing now. Okay, and let's check the exception. Here it's showing that there is an assertion error and the message is not true, whatever that you specify here, right? And you can see the expected value and actual value here, right? And after that, if you inspect, you can see that the next line is not executed. You can't see the test finished statement printed here, right? It's not printed. Now let's move into the next method, assert false. So I'm gonna modify this to assert false, and let's specify the same value here, which is already false. So we are asserting that this value is false, which is correct, right? And if it is not correct, what should be printed here, right? So let's say not false, okay? But in this case, it should be pass, right? Because whatever we are asserting is correct. Now let's run it and check it out. Okay, the test is passed. Now let's change the value to true and let's see the result. Now we are asserting that this value is false, but it's not correct, right? So let's see what happens. The test should fail and it's failing, and you're getting the result. There is an assertion error, and here you can see the message that we specified, not false. The expected value is false, but actually it's true. Now let's see how we can assert a particular object is null. We can use the assert null method, and when you specify the object as the argument, if the object is not null, it will throw an exception with the message object not null. Likewise, you can use assert not null method to assert that a particular object is not null. Okay, and if it is not correct, it will throw an exception with the message object is null. Now let's try it out in the project. In the purchase test class, let's add one more method. Let me copy the previous one and paste it. Let's change the test name as purchase test 5. Let's change this text to print as well. And then let me change these two lines, okay? So instead of boolean, we need an object here, right? So let's use maybe the string, and let's give a value here. Maybe let's give null, okay? Let's make this object string object null, okay? And maybe let me rename it as S, and then instead of assert false, let's have assert null. All right, and let's specify the object S here. All right, and here we are asserting that a particular object is null, and if that's not true, let's say not null, okay? All right, so we know that the object is null here, so this should not throw an exception, right? The test should pass. Let's execute and try it out. Here you can see that the test is passed. Now let's change the value to something else. Maybe let's give something like test here, and now let's execute it again. So now it should be failed. Why? Because whatever we are asserting here is not correct, right? We are asserting that it has to be null, but it's not null. It has got a value. So now you can see that the test is failed and it's throwing an exception with not null message, right? You can see the expected value is null and actual value is test. Now let's try with the next method, assert not null, okay? And let's change the message here as value is null, okay? So we are asserting that this particular object is not null, and if it's not correct, it will throw an exception with the message value is null. Okay, so here we know that it's not null, so the test should pass. Let's run it and check it out. It's passing now. Well, now let's change the value to null and let's see what happens. Okay, now here it's assert not null, but it's actually null, right? So it should fail and should be showing the message here, right? Assertion error, value is null, right? Value is null. This is the message that we gave, and it's giving additional information like, expected object to not to be null. Okay, that's coming from TestNG. So we'll be using all these assert statements wherever required in our test.